Becoming the crocodile. If you stand only on the safety of the banks, spearing fish, how can you know the depths of the river? Can you fathom the darkness under a ledge of rock, or understand the life of the fish writhing on your spear? You mistake the teeth of the crocodile as the edge of the abyss, but the chasm is more terrible than teeth and certain. I fulfill the law, and the law demands your blood. I am Sebek, the crocodile, the catastrophe, the devourer, the necessity. Impaled on my teeth, you shall be blessed, for you will glimpse truth. I am only the secrets of your own dark heart, your lust, your greed, your anger, your flesh, to tear the darkness from your heart. I am the living power of water, the cry that catches in the throat, the sob that shatters stone. On my teeth you smell the stink of flesh. To you I seem a living horror. But I tell you in truth, I am your own soul, and it is with great sorrow that I crush the life you have made. I weep with the loss, but you do not believe. Such destruction is madness, you say. You do not understand. Is it madness to cut the wheat so that bread can be made? When you were born in this bright land, did you not weep for the lost dark of the womb? Whether or not you understand the law, you exist because of it. When you've reached the lips of the great devourer, you are staring into the jaws of creation. That's from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, my beloved truth seekers. Wisdom and warning for the ages, and way before there was anything close to the Old Testament. And that pretty much says it all concerning our topic on coffee, cigarettes, and Gnosis on this approximately Saturday, February 2nd, 2008. And the topic, my beloved truth seekers, is death and the otherworlds. One a temporary inconvenience and nature's way of telling you something is wrong. The other a permanent middle neighborhood of the ethereal plane, much like the virtual Alexandria that holds the keys of Gnosis that the timeless Pharisees have been hiding for millions of years.
Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
Death, my beloved truth seekers. To most of us, it is the final frontier of the fraud we call our exoteric lives. But the reality is that death, the cessation of our biology, and the packing up of the defective motherboard drive ego we were temporarily given, is but a thin veil between the kenoma, the emptiness that is the universe, and the otherworlds. And by the otherworlds, I mean those shadowy nations between the phenomenal world and the divine imagination, where nothing is truly alive or dead, nothing is truly awake or dreaming, but a holy grayness stockpiling secrets that can benefit us in the world of forms.
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Some have called it Shield, the Shadowlands, the moving heavens of the Hermeticis, the collective unconscious, the home of our ancestors, Limbo, Imagica, and other cognomens. Getting there is not so hard, but you have to experience a sliver of death in all its sappers first.
But tonight, we dine in hell!
In any event, because you will not stop for death, death will kindly stop for you very soon. A Sufi master once said that the key to enlightenment is found in just 2 sentences every day when you wake up. One is telling yourself that today I will die. The other is that there is no God but God. In that way you will see the cruelty and grace of life in its true form. Was the Sufi master right? Give it a try, because besides ruining and casting false hopes over your life, Jehovah loves randomly murdering people in order to keep their live waves bouncing off the corners of the universe. Death is as important as life when it comes down to it, but most of us live in abject fear for both, just as the creator of the universe desires it.
What's God?
Well,
You know, when you want something really bad and you close your eyes and you wish for it, God's the guy that ignores you.
Let us end this because both death and life are mirages in a desert of desperation.
Kinda takes the fun out of being alive, doesn't it?
And we don't have to visit a spiritualist church or prepare tedious funeral arrangements that bore our families to find the truths about death and its neighboring territories. For tens of thousands of years, shamans, Gnostics, mystics, honorable priests, and even curious Jonathan Livingston Seagull types have crossed past the firewalls of consciousness into the otherworlds by manipulating the dynamic energies of life and the quiet noise of death. And they've emailed us back answers that we no longer listen to in this era of spiritual materialism and extroverted altruism.
This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time.
Yet these psychonauts, heroes voyaging into the inner more human universe, have revealed energy-awakening rituals, sacred places of living magic, arcane messages spoken by the gods, and vibrant myths that unlock the pathways to bliss where death shall have no dominion. Like I said once before, the distance between you and the nearest star is the same distance as you and your inner Godhead. The difference is that there are maps to these interior zones of dreams and a more authentic reality, way stations to the pleroma where you can purchase astral maps at soul gas stations and perhaps eat the beef jerky of the pharaohs like the ancient Egyptians did.
Are you running a high fever? How could you conceive of something so idiotic?
To give us a sober hand on death and the otherworlds, we have the felicity of having back Phil Gardiner, best-selling author of Gnosis, The Secret of Solomon's Temple Revealed, The Ark, the Shroud, and Mary, and several other books you should seriously considering, including his new one discussed today, Gateways to the Otherworld, The Secrets Beyond the Final Journey, From the Egyptian Underworld to the Gates in the Sky. Phil is also presently a prolific producer of esoteric documentaries like Order, Quantum, Mind of God, and Secrets of the Serpents. His complete list of materials, these days becoming legion, can be found at his website, gardinersworld.com. That is GARDINERSWORLD.com. Personally, I fondly dig Phil because you'll rarely find a more independent thinker of the recondite.
Hail to the king, baby.
He takes no dogmatic stand on anything, but is open to everything mysterious, and in the end he makes up his mind about all things regardless of the fortresses of static institutions. He also isn't your average gumdrop mystic, because Phil balances science, reason, and common sense with all of his occult findings. And he's a cool mythicist and Gnostic, a combination that will be the only form of Gnosticism that will change the world in the future.
I remember how the meaning of words began to change. How unfamiliar words like collateral and rendition became frightening. While things like Northfire and the Articles of Allegiance became powerful. I remember how different became dangerous. I still don't understand it. Why they hate us so much.
But we were talking about death, weren't we? What do we do about it? Well, you'll be surprised that we can seduce Lady Death of the Sandman comics in our present incarnations. When the Gnostics, including St. Paul, speak of the end of death, they really mean the end of ignorance, that greatest of sins, the dissipation of fear to the predatory universe, and a transcendental vision to higher realms of the palm tree garden, beyond our autocratic ego. That is enlightenment. That is salvation. That is knowing that your material form will soon pass away, but a higher frequency will survive, will flow into the truth that all is one and one is all. There will be no distinction. You will behold, perhaps for a fraction, the one of Plato, Valis of Philip K. Dick, the Force of Star Wars, or the Aeon of the Kabbalah. and they call for your divine atoms, at least those of us who have it, to glide upward and outward when some of us can break from the cycle of birth and rebirth.
What I came to understand is that change is not a choice. Not for a species of plant, not for me. It happens, and you are different.
Like the Gospel of Philip says, those who say that the Lord died first and then rose up are in error, for he rose up first and then died. If one does not first attain the resurrection, he will not die. And furthermore it says, light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers of one another. They are inseparable. Because of this, neither are the good good, nor evil evil, nor is life life, nor is death death. For this reason each one will dissolve into its earliest origin, but those who are exalted above the world are indissoluble and eternal. And lastly, my favorite gospel says, and so he dwells either in this world, or in the resurrection, or in the middle place. God forbid that I be found in there. In this world there is good and evil. It is good things are not good, and its evil things not evil. But there's evil after this world which is truly evil, what is called the middle. It is death. While we are in this world, it is fitting for us to acquire the resurrection, so that when we strip off the flesh, we may be found in rest and not walk in the middle. For many go astray on the way. For it is good to come forth from the world before one has sinned.
Crucifixion? Good. Out of the door, line on the left, one cross each.
We don't want to be in the middle, my beloved true seekers, which is basically the state of selling out. One example saying stupid things at funerals like, he's looking down at us from heaven. And we've all sold out in various ways. We buy into the promises of a life full of high-definition televisions and retirements in Arizona, and then we begin truly dying. We don't want to be in the middle, balancing our existence between the bone-crushing denial of life and our terror of losing our bodies and personas in death.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Yeah.
We must be proactive and go through the middle with the middle path of the Buddha, the narrow way of Jesus, and the balance of Taoism. We want complete, uncompromising freedom as the ancient Gnostics wanted it. And in the various mysteries I've talked about is where the unspeakable answers reside.
And you're already dead!
One great example is the ancient Eleusinian mysteries of Greece. It is said that when the initiates, the hierophants, and the neophytes left this mystic festival, one thing they all showed was the loss of fear of death. These people, from all castes of life, all genders, and all intellectual leanings, traveled by various ceremonies into the otherworld and found more powerful realities than death. They defied the gods and were gripped by enthusiasm, which in ancient times meant the divine essence entered their beings. They understood that death was just the beginning of awe, and life just a minor vehicle of consciousness. Phil in his new book, Otherworlds, gives countless other examples, but the story is the same in almost all cultures. Death is a stage. The otherworld is ours for the taking if we can defeat the zodiacal archons that guard the doorways of perception.
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
But you must let go of your ego. You must let go of your personality you think is so unique. You must let go of your loved ones, your accomplishments, your victories and defeats, your misplaced love for nature and its brutal cycles. You see, you don't take any of this on your voyage. Very much like Siddhartha said goodbye to his wife and son before he destroyed suffering, and Jesus left his family back in Nazareth who thought he was mad. You must accept that you must become what all Gnostics are, allogenes, or strangers in Greek.
Wilson! 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 Wilson!
And then you just might be touched by the grace of pleromatic energies that are above any feeling, any emotion, and any sensation you've ever experienced. You must say goodbye to everything in the phenomenal world, for it is a gorgeous penal complex spun by the angelic mafia. If not, you can be born again and again, slapped in the ass as a newborn baby, and continuously slapped in the ass by a universe that sees you as its latest meal. Like the Gospel of Thomas, number 56 says, Jesus said, "Whoever has come to know the world has discovered a carcass, and whoever has discovered a carcass, of that person the world is not worthy." And the Gospel of Philip states, "The world is a corpse eater. All the things eaten in themselves die also. Truth is a life eater. Therefore no one nourished by truth will die." It was from that place that Jesus came and brought food. To those who so desired he gave life, that they might not die. In the archetypal stories of the dying rising godmen, as well as eternal champions, is where we can find more answers. Inanna, Jesus, Odysseus, Balder, Orpheus, Attis, Persephone all traveled into the otherworlds and returned with a higher state of consciousness. They ripped death's veil from top to bottom. They gave their bodies, their loves, and all they knew to become members of dimensions we only imagine when we are alone, listening to our iPods, curtains closed, the worries of the world outside the door of our arguing parents.
Idle hands are the devil's playground.
And how do we know when we get there? Think of Idol in The Last Samurai, at the end when the sword is run through him with the help of the pillow biter Tom Cruise. The last thing he does before dying is gaze out at the blooming poppies in the distance. Perfect, he says. Perfect. You'll know you've defeated death when you glance at the passing of the temporal world and simply say, perfect.
Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world. I feel like I can't take it.
When I was a Buddhist, I was told that the ego vanishes and our Atman comes into the universal podcast in these ways. Meditation, that moment right before orgasm, the point where we are almost asleep, that Eliphas Levi called the hypnagogue state, and right before we die. Being present at your death is an important event in anyone's existence. For then we travel upward through the chakras, experiencing all the hells and paradises, until we reach the zenith of the crown chakra. If we are aware and ready, we can go beyond into nirvana. If we are our usual narcissistic selves, we plunge back to the lower chakras to begin the cycle anew. Again, think of having your ass slapped again by doctors and starting life over again, including having your butt wiped by adults, middle school, the humiliation of job interviews, and how dumb you look when you lose your virginity.
And we can't argue with destiny now, can we?
This is just another vision of those who travel beyond death to the otherworlds. The furniture and curtains are different, the experiences are the same, and each one of us has the capability to purchase a plane ticket to the farthest shores. Are you willing to do this, my beloved truth seekers? Or are you just going to listen to this program, read Phil's book on the weekend, and then wonder what is going on in Grey's Anatomy or what your team is doing in training camp? Like Timothy Freak said, life is foreplay, death is the climax. The choice is yours. This is Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis. I am Abraxas. But enough of my drivel. This is Phil Gardiner. This is the Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis interview With us today, we definitely have the pleasure and the honor of having back Phil Gardiner, author of many books, best-selling books, and now making some wonderful movies that are all available on DVD. Even you can get them through Netflix here in the United States. But we will be discussing his new book, Otherworlds, a book that is so full of information that we don't even know where to start. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Miguel.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, always good to have you back, but why don't we start with the basic theme? What exactly do you mean by the other world?
Well, that might be a very short question, but the answer could be very long, because it's something that has been around, I would suggest, ever since man became conscious. I think we all know that when he became conscious, he was raising himself up from maybe its ordinary nature into consciousness, and thereby bringing with him a little bit of chaos, because he was suddenly aware that he was an ordinary beast, an animal that was going to die one day. And so I think in consciousness he started to develop and try and find answers which would help his psychology in respect of that fact, to try to come to terms with the fact that his mortal body would wither. And I think also unconsciously he also imagined a great many things, and this causes an emotion within man, which can get very complicated, and we can get down the road of deep psychology. But some of the answers he came to were that he would go off to another realm after death. Was not his physical body, although that was certainly the case in some cultures. They did believe that, and symbolized that by placing the body into the earth, into the womb, back into the womb from where it came, or sending it up in fire, in flames, back into the energy. But he also came to the conclusion in his wanderings within his mind that maybe it was possible for him to contact ancestors in that other world, or maybe even journey into that other world where the deities resided. And so we get a very, very complex system building over thousands of years, which we now know is split into a great many wonderful stories and tales and folklores about the other world, from the Celtic Avalon, famous by Arthur and the like, to the Christian heaven and hell, and concepts of paradise, and the Greek and Roman, and very many different kinds of other worlds that have been generated from that original spark of chaos, of discovery of where we were going to. So that's really what Otherworlds was about. It was about what truth is there to it, if any. What is it about man that makes him search for that? And if it's true, what are the processes, both in terms of psychological processes, and are there any scientific processes to it? Is there a truth to it, and what is the science?
And what I'm getting is that death is not really the final frontier, but it's actually delving into the human, the collective unconscious. You call it the Akkadian records. Isn't that what's it all about, that we are all and one is all?
Oh,
death
absolutely.
Is just a minor burp in our journey?
Well, I never heard life discussed as a burp before, but it's certainly as good as any other. I would suggest that the leanings that we have today, mainly brought on by modern science of quantum physics and a new understanding of dimensions, has helped us comprehend something that our ancestors, especially the Eastern ancestors and the more pagan elements, that we were all parts and parcel of a greater one anyway, and that to look inside ourselves is really to look outside, and that there is no in and out, that it is all just one, and we're part of that. The concept of the gateway to the other world, seems to be comprehending that psychologically, but also finding the means and methods of getting into this other state or dimension and being conscious of it. It's the role of the shaman, if you like, who was the individual, male and female, originally female more so than male, who could supposedly do various things such as take drugs or dervish or meditate and get themselves into a mental state which altered their perceptions of nature itself, and they saw things very differently. And when you investigate that scientifically, you find that when you ask people, when you question them, and I say scientifically because you need to do it, you need to do many of them, and you need to check the answers against one another from different cultures and different societies, and you find that the concepts are the same. And one of the things that comes through is a feeling of oneness. So not only is our science, our modern science and our modern perceptions altering towards this oneness, but the very act itself brings on the emotion of oneness, that they are not an individual, not separate from, but they are one with all at all time. And it's an incredible emotion. And, you know, my thoughts, as ever, were, well, what truth is there to it, and is there any science to it? What is the frequency that we're working on there? That was really driving me. You know, I've just this minute finished a phone call from somebody who claims to be a psychic, for instance, and since he can remember, he has heard voices in his head. He has somehow known what is happening elsewhere, and he's never been able to understand it, and it has always confused him, upset him. He's never tried to get any kind of, he's never tried to boost his ego by getting in front of the camera or anything like that. But he's just been upset by it. And the point is that that's been going on for thousands of years. And I'm of the opinion that it's ever since we became conscious, we've been having these experiences. My drive was to find out what truth there was to it.
And you believe that it's the shaman, the gifted ones in the tribe or the society, they're the only ones privy to the other world, or is it something that we can all have access to?
Well, I kind of look at it this way. The psychic that I was just talking to is into what's known as the indigo children, that people may or may not know about. These are special children, they say, that are genetically better or genetically more intelligent or whatever, gifted by aliens, or, you know, a great many different answers they have to it. My point is opposite to that. I think differently. I think that psychologically we were all gifted, and we are all gifted in ability to understand our own nature, to discover ourselves and to find that connection to the one, and that it's society today and over the last few hundred years that has diverted us from that core truth about ourselves, that when we sit watching the TV and watching the advertisements and reading everybody else's opinion on everything and developing that for ourselves instead of finding our own opinion on life, that we are diverting ourselves from our true nature, and that less and less of us are believing that we have the ability to understand this connection to the oneness because of the diversion of society. So I would agree with what you've just said, that we're all capable. We just don't know it.
And Phil, why is as you write a lot, why is the goddess archetype so important for the voyage into the otherworld?
Well, that depends on who you listen to, of course. If we want to take a Gnostic angle on that, we have to realize that the goddess is important because this is, or maybe symbolic of a different element within our mind, that this is the wisdom element spoken of many, many times, that there is no point in trying to enter any kind of altered state, in doing any of the nonsense drugs, of taking yourself off like some Buddhist monk for hours and hours and days and weeks and months to enter these other worlds, which we'll call them, without wisdom, because that is the all-important thing, that we must have balance if we're going to be trying to do these things. If not, we will find what the Christians call hell, because we'll be taking with us all that baggage, and we do develop an awful lot of nasty baggage in our lives today. So we need some wisdom to come with us, and of course Sophia, meaning wisdom, the goddess of wisdom, is something that we have to remember.
And one thing very interesting that you point out in your book is that probably the first dying and rising savior was probably Inanna of the Sumerians. Doesn't she go into the underworld and is crucified?
That, as most people will know, is something that's been copied again and again and again. And I'm a firm believer, as you know, Miguel, that we should go back as far as possible in the history that we've got to discover what truth there is in today. And I don't believe for 1 minute that Inanna was a real person, or that Jesus Christ was a real person in respect of what was written about that person, because most of these things are mythologized afterwards for a great many years. But she is probably, one, an archetype, that we must crucify the ego, but two, she is probably based also upon original shamaness concepts, that you go in there, but in order to access these other places you have to sacrifice part of yourself to do that, and anybody who knows anything about the shaman will know that they are often blinded or mutilated in some form as a symbolic representation of payment to get into that other place. It's all about losing part of yourself. You find mystics beating themselves in order to beat back the base nature, the material element of themselves, so that they can escape their body, realizing that the real self is within.
One thing also that you point out in your book is that the place where science and mysticism can find common ground is the concept of wave energies across Mother Earth. Could you explain how they agree on this?
Well, they're coming to some agreement in a lot of the different ways. Of course, scientists aren't really interested in mystics, and mystics aren't interested in scientists, and probably rightfully so. But there's some common ground in some meetings I've just had recently, actually, which aren't in the book, but will make the point. People will know of dowsers, people who dowse with rods. I mean, I've got a couple right at the side of me here, which were made for me, for my hand size. And I've never been a dowser, and I've never been into dowsing, but a really good friend of mine, Hamish Miller, the writer, made these for me. He's a blacksmith, and he's put a couple of little serpents on them, bless him. And I picked them up and walked around, and lo and behold, for some strange reason, I was picking up currents, and I had absolutely no wish to do it, and I had no desire for it not to work. I was completely neutral in it. And so I wanted to know, well, is there any truth to this earth energy that I'm supposedly picking up? Of course, I was walking around my living room and probably picking up the electric currents from the various sockets. But when you talk to Hamish, you find that Hamish and other scientists that he's got working with him, are finding that humans can connect to the electromagnetic wavelength of the Earth, which actually does have an energy, which of course it has. The whole universe does, and life was given life because of energy. But can humans pick it up? And that's what it appears that dowsers have been doing for an awful long time. So you've got this kind of mystical world of dowsers who are seen as magicians, or have been seen as magicians or fakers, now coming more and more strongly online with scientists who are actually registering the energy on the Earth that these people are saying is there. They're actually discovering it and proving it. Really fascinating. Whether those rods are moving on their own, or whether it's the muscles within our hands twitching and making them move, doesn't matter. The point is that they're moving in the right places without foreknowledge, and I know, because I have no foreknowledge of these things. So there is an energy in the Earth, and in that respect we can pick it up with the dowsing. But can we pick it up at deeper levels? And to me, I wanted to know what the frequency was of the Earth, what frequency was of certain objects, such as certain rocks and crystals, that our ancestors have spoken of as being very powerful and for some reason important. And I wanted to know if that had any relationship at all to frequencies that occurred inside the mind, but more specifically at different periods of the mind, at different times of day, different times of thought within the mind, because I think it's important to understand that when man was putting himself into a certain state of mind, he was altering the frequency of his thoughts. And if that frequency, I had this kind of strange hunch that if that frequency matched that of the earth, it would mean that man was in the point of nearly being asleep, that he was in some form able to access his unconscious self and thereby able to beat off all these other things in consciousness which were affecting him, which was stopping him from being able to see what may be called the truth. So I had this hunch that that was the case, and that's where that's the basis of the book. Really, is finding that frequency.
From your book and from what I'm getting, is basically science is the one that is just catching up to the ancient mystics, isn't it?
Oh, I'd say definitely. Our ancient mystics knew something, didn't they, when they were getting into these states and opening their mind up to more possibilities, using the power of the imagination, for instance, which I believe is the most powerful part of the human. It's not his muscles, it's not how many books you can read, it's his imagination, but that can be bad too. So imagination can be a very powerful thing. And I think that the mystic opened up that imagination, used that imagination to access the oneness. Scientists today are amazingly finding that these frequencies that our mystic friends were getting into, that these frequencies are incredibly healing to the human. I'll give you for instance, when NASA sent its astronauts into space, they were finding that they were getting depressed. Peculiar, but somebody came onto the notion that maybe it's because they were out of phase with the Earth, frequency-wise. And so they placed emitters within the spacecraft to emit the frequency of the Earth, which at that point was around 9-10 hertz. And the astronauts were actually much more healthy of mind. So they were actually distanced from Mother Earth. They were missing their mother. It's as simple as that. Wow. So the scientists discovered something that our mystical friends of the past already understood, and that the pagan people, real pagan people, which means people of the earth, people of nature understand anyway, that when you're in the mountains, you're at one with it. We've all hopefully had moments of such deepness. I know I have several times. I'll give you one or two. I was in the woods, the forests of Northern California, which just stretch for an awful long way, walking really late at night, and with a wolf. And it's a tamed wolf. It's a wolf that the friends got and has brought up from childhood. And I've never felt so complete in all my life than walking in the woods with a wolf. You feel such a connection to nature itself, and that it would be a frequency inside my mind. And it's what your dog whisperer, Caesar Milan, says is that calm mode that you need to be in, and that other animals, he says this and he doesn't know why, but the animals pick up on it because they're on the same frequency. How many times do we say that? I'm on the same wavelength. Another element, I have that calmness with animals. I don't know why I was born with it, but I just have that calmness. And I was in Australia recently, and I walked outside in the morning in the middle of nowhere, in this lovely house in the middle of nowhere. Walked outside with a cup of coffee just to watch the sunrise, and within 3 foot of me is this 8-9 foot kangaroo staring at me. Wow. Just chewing the cud and staring at me. And on the other side of the window is my friend screaming through the window saying, "Phil, for Christ's sake, get back in the house now. It's going to rip your guts open," because they have this ability, apparently, like velociraptors, to tear at you. And I just completely ignored him because I knew full well that the kangaroo had no intentions of ripping my guts open and was just saying good morning to me. And it wasn't interested. It didn't think like humans do. It was just purely, "Hi, you're here, I'm here, and isn't the grass good, and look at the sun." It was just a connection that we both had. And I've had the same thing with brown bears. I've had the same thing with eagles. I've rescued birds locally here, which other people have tried to catch, but which have just jumped into my hand. So I'm not a mystic, I'm not a shaman, I'm nothing special, but I just have a calmness which places me in a frequency that the animals, that nature itself understands. And I think that scientists are coming to that now with the development of brainwave frequency technology that they're discovering is curing all kinds of different things. And one person that I came across while listening to the BBC radio, where they were talking about his new system, is actually developing something that's quite remarkable. So I got on the phone and just went down to see him and to stick myself on his machine, which he very kindly did. And it's a machine which monitors your brainwave functions, but it monitors the balance between the left and right hemispheres, which was something that you'll know from our past discussions. I'm really interested in balance, not just the psychological concepts of balance, but the frequency of balance within the mind, which I think is brought on by the psychological balance. So I wanted to know whether the fact that I feel calm around animals, that I have that frequency, that I work on balance psychologically, I wanted to know if it was actually true scientifically, if there was a balance in my mind. So he hooked me up to these nodes, which were stuck all over my head, and lo and behold, the frequencies which appeared on screen were in perfect balance. So much so that out of thousands of people that he's had on this machine, he's never seen anybody so balanced. Which doesn't surprise me, because the people that go are people that are out of balance, and they're going for help. But he said, you've got a Ferrari brain, and I've never seen one like it. Well, I don't claim to have a Ferrari brain, but for some reason that I was in balance. But I wanted to know, could we improve that balance? And so that's what we went about doing. And the methods are remarkably similar in science today, unconnected to knowledge of the past, but they're remarkably similar to what the shaman were doing. And that's what got me. I thought, right, that's it. That's exactly what I was looking for, that there is confirmation here. Science is proving that what our mystics and friends of the past were doing does actually improve the mind physically. It does actually scientifically improve the mind. It isn't all bullshit.
And how do the, let's say, great buildings like the pyramids and the towers aid the shamanistic voyage?
The reason I came around to that was because of the discovery of this frequency. I had the hunch when I went to see this gentleman that a certain that he needed to try and train my brain into a certain frequency. And the hunch was that this frequency is the point between awake and asleep, between the alpha and theta, around about 8 hertz. And I had a concept that was the point that our shaman and mystic friends were connecting to this other part of their mind, this what they called the other world. And so we entrained my brain back down to a certain frequency, which was 7.83 hertz, the point between awake and asleep. And it was at that point that things started to change in my perceptions. As you start to see different spectrums of light. You start to hear more clearly, and even my headaches were cured. And I had bad headaches for a while there, but this entrainment seemed to cure that. But I had a hunch that frequency would be found within the ancient kind of buildings, megaliths, standing stones, etc. of the world, where people like Hamish Miller, the dowser, believe that the earth itself has particular spikes, or that a convergence, that man has brought about a convergence of the energy of the earth, which, when in a dormant state, when not exercised runs around 8 hertz, the same frequency that the mind is in when it connects to the unconscious. So at the moment it isn't running at that because we are messing it about, but when it's in a normal state it's around 8 hertz. So I wanted to know what frequency such things as the Great Pyramid was emitting, and to know that you have to understand the Great Pyramid is in the centre of the Earth's landmass relative to where it is. It is the centre of the Earth's landmass. It's mainly limestone, which is one of the perfect collectors of frequency. That in the very heart, the very king's chamber itself, this place where supposedly pharaohs were buried and none found, all we find is granite, great encasements of granite in a granite sarcophagus with these great granite triangle shapes above, pointing downwards as if directing the frequency down into the very sarcophagus itself, which was only, the only thing they found in there was saline solution, salt, as if it's a flotation tank, which makes you think, is this pyramid a collector of the energy of the earth, which runs and was running then at the same frequency that our mind is in when we are in that altered state, and that granite itself resonates at the same frequency, and granite is the material used in the Great Pyramid itself. But it not only resonates at that, it magnifies it because of the quartz crystal content, which incredibly grows at 52-degree angles, the same as the Great Pyramid, and incredibly magnifies and amplifies that frequency. It seems to be, could it be, an incredible ancient machine for accessing the other world, because that's what all the evidence points to.
And speaking of crystals, do you believe that crystals like quartz crystals and other stuff that they use in New Age could be helpful for us to access the other world?
Well, I don't for 1 minute believe that going around hugging crystals and wearing them around your neck is going to make any difference to anybody. But sat right in front of me now, I have a massive piece of quartz crystal, naturally grown quartz crystal, which is just a beauty to behold. And the reason that I got into quartz crystal and wanted to know more about it was because of its resonant frequency, that it resonates at the same frequency as our mind when we are in that altered state. And I couldn't believe it, that it grows at 52-degree angles, the same as the Great Pyramid. Could be a complete coincidence, of course, but it does. And it is a major component of granite used in a great many of our sacred buildings. And so I did a really silly thing in the book and got a friend who is a totally ordinary person, has no comprehension of what me and you talk about and your guests, and couldn't care less, sits watching soaps all day long and is a complete wink, really. So I got him, and I wanted him to get into a state of mind. So I did various things that our ancestors had done. I made him fast, I made him meditate, I made him get into these things, which he hated. But I also placed this large piece of granite beneath his pillow, just to add an inkling that it may somehow magnify the effect. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. This isn't a proper scientific test. But all the things that we did made this person change. And that was the most interesting thing, that whatever process it was, whether it was the granite, whether it was the meditation which I'm more towards, and the psychology that was working upon him, made him change in various ways, not least of which he felt more calmed, he felt more relaxed, but he also was open to different spectrums of light. He started to see the trees, spirits, if you like, as our ancestors would call them. He could see different light emanating from them. They would alter colour. So it affected the frequencies of his mind, and therefore the frequency of his sight and his hearing as well. It was an incredible, little exercise.
So basically, and especially from reading your book, human beings, all human beings, are really truly natural receivers and emitters of electromagnetic and other energies. I mean, you show how we have more than 5 senses and a ton of other evidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not me who's done that work. That work was a report that went to the UN itself, and it was a report showing, I think it was 23 different sensors or more. I can't remember now, but it was an awful lot of sensors, and a lot of them were proven to not even be part of our body, but to be external to our body. We emit an energy just external to our skin, which picks up other elements which are affecting us. So we unconsciously work through all the processes. We unconsciously pick up X number of different inputs into our body. Until we're conscious of them, we don't know that we're doing them. Until somebody says, "What can you smell?" You don't even think about smelling. And so that's the case for a great many things. We've just become unaware of it. But by opening the mind up in these frequencies, this specific frequency, which we call the Holy Grail frequency, the conscious acts of closing everything off are gone, and we're open to a great many things. And so it does what the mystics have always said. It makes them believe they can know all things, because all things are suddenly open to us. We're not closing them off. At the end of the day, all things are mathematics. They're all ratios. From the very Big Bang, or whatever it was, those ratios have been cascading outwards, and we are simply a result of those ratios. And electromagnetism and all the other different energies related to it are part of that mathematical formula, and so are we. And it could even be argued that our very consciousness itself is part of that mathematical formula. In fact, I've had many discussions with other writers about whether our consciousness is not just the result of that wonderful mathematics, which makes us all the same, but is the culmination and meaning behind that mathematics. But that's a philosophical discussion for another day, I believe.
And, for example, a listener to this show and this interview wants to decide they want to take that inner journey into the collective subconscious and, get away from the material world, like you and I made that decision years ago.
Yeah.
What do you recommend they should do?
Pay me lots of money. No.
Read your books.
No, not at all. I think, to be honest, the journey is different for everybody. And making one blank statement for everybody is always difficult. The first thing that everybody must do, though, is come to terms with who they are, meaning find themselves. And that is not always so easy, because what do we mean by finding ourselves? I've said it before. We go and watch James Bond at the movies, and we all walk out there trying to find a gadget and getting in our car, putting our shades on and thinking that we're James Bond. And we do that in many ways all our lives. From the moment we're born, it's an evolutionary drive within us to learn from our peers so that we can survive. But we take it to bastardized forms when we do things like the James Bond scenario. So we need to understand that we aren't James Bond, and that when somebody says, who are you? We don't answer with, "Oh, I'm the manager of McDonald's." We answer with who we are, truly, if you can find that person. So that's the first role for anybody, and it sounds simple maybe to me and you who have understood that and comprehended that a long time ago, but to most people it's a silly statement that they don't get, they don't understand. So firstly, I would say try to understand that. Who are you? The second major important thing is, once you've discovered that, don't lose it. It's a constant battle to find it, because it will constantly be being replaced. But find balance between logic and emotion, between good and bad, whatever those concepts are, of course. You need to find balance, and that is a physical balance, but it's brought on by a mental balance, a psychological balance, and something that our ancestors have been on and on and on about, and that's the whole point of Gnosis, is to find that knowledge of self and knowledge of balance.
You talk about, I'm sorry to interrupt, Phil, but you stress very much that brain hemisphere centering is probably a very essential thing. Balancing the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Something so simple we can do by simply breathing in one nostril, but most people don't do it.
Absolutely. The process I went through, as I spoke about earlier, where I had the nodes placed on my head, in order to get more balance between the hemispheres of my brain, we used light and sound. And that was special glasses that were placed on my face, on my eyes, and some headphones. And to balance up the left side, sound was placed into my right and light was placed into my right eye at different frequency levels in order to get the frequency entrained in my brain to that. Now that's something that shaman did. They would bang a drum, play a penny whistle, hum, make certain noises. And if you listen to the Buddhist monks who sit there and sing Om, and you listen to the Muezzin crying of Islam, you find that frequency being played out, that it's a natural harmony that we have amazingly discovered, that F sharp itself, that penny whistles were tuned to, is the frequency that we need to be getting into. It's a natural harmonic. So we can get into that, and things like don't listen to thrash metal, for instance, will screw up your brain because your brain waves will try to attune some Aeon afterwards. Aeon is the food of the brain, of the mind, and maybe a period of time, and you can actually matches your logic, because it's not a matter of raising the ones, which are things where the eyelids stay shut, and all kinds of different things can be cured from it. And I've seen kids that have been doing absolutely appallingly in school because they were slightly autistic go through this brain entrainment, and then, without telling the teachers, they've gone to school following this and have just whipped everybody else. And the teachers have been like, what's going off? Why are these kids suddenly more intelligent? Well, they're not more intelligent. They're more in balance. That's all. They're more in that calm mode. But that calm mode is opening things up, that calm balance, the flat sea of the mind.
So this is definitely one of the first steps. And then I'm assuming after that is just simply finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Ritual, what kind of mystery works for you, whether it's entheogens, meditation, and so forth. It's just kind of a trial and error.
Well, I'd say so, but I wouldn't want anybody to try drugs to do it, because there's no need for that. Not when there are a million other methods of doing these things. And in the similar vein, I would say that there is no need for a religion either, because that's just a drug as well. It's just a psychological drug. You find yourself, and you'll find the answer, is what I would say.
Yeah, it's the old know thyself, very basic.
Yeah, simple.
Very basic, yeah. And to end the interview, and this is a little off topic, but I was pretty floored by it, and you mentioned it a few times in your book, Otherworlds. You mentioned that the Council of Nicaea was not as, historical legend tells us, through Eusebius and all the other church fathers, that it was all these wise bishops getting together and agreeing through the Holy Spirit, but it was actually attended by pagans who also wanted a state religion or a new form of religion that appeased all the religions.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, Christianity is built upon an empire-building Rome. It is, after all, the Roman Catholic Church. So they didn't want to go around creating a new religion from scratch, and they didn't want to have to foist their old religion on people that were seeing things and they thought a different way. The truth is that all those different religions got together, or the top people did, the top brass, and the Christian reporting of it afterwards calls them bishops. Well, in the Christian eyes, I suppose a top pagan guy is a bishop of the pagan church, and they always have these wonderful circular arguments that, well, we only call them pagan and they're only slightly different because they didn't know of the wonderful nature of Christ, or they didn't know of our wonderful system. So, but now they do. They're bishops. this is what occurred, that these people were called bishops, that the Church of the Far North sent their bishop. Well, Church of the Far North may have been pagans or people who were following the Scandinavian many-deity concepts, which weren't really many-deity, but were all aspects of the one, very much like Egypt. But that's really what occurred. It's just a re-propagandizing, and that's what the Catholic Church has been absolutely fantastic at since its very beginning. It's been fantastic at propaganda from day one. And I've just come back from Malta yet again, where, to me, Malta is the pinnacle of Catholic propaganda, in the fact that it was virtually built by the Knights of Malta, the Knights of St. John, who were drawn from across Europe. So you get every element rammed into this one little place. Instead of having to go to France and to Italy and to Germany and England, you go to Malta, you go to Valletta and to the Church of St. John, or the cathedral, the co-cathedral of St. John, and you will see all of Europe in that one place, all of the symbolism, all of the pagan myths are all there. Everything is there, reinterpreted in the new Christian creed. And it's a fascinating place, I would say. If anybody wants to get into the religious history of the world, just go to Malta first.
I guess that's pretty much all the time we have today. So what do you have in the plans? You say you're coming with a new book in April?
Yes, I've just finished a new book, which is called The Bond Code. It's all about Ian Fleming and James Bond. So Ian Fleming did actually place some secrets into his books in code. So it's about unravelling those codes, which you'll be surprised to hear are Gnostic. I'm sorry, terrible cough. So that's interesting, and just in time for the 100th anniversary of his birth, so good marketing as well. And I've just finished a film, just finished doing some filming on Malta, as I've just said, which was both for a Knights of Malta film and one on Jules Verne, a great Freemason and Rosicrucian.
Yeah, it seems somehow you keep running into the most amazing things. I don't know how you do it.
Having their eyes open.
Yeah, basically it, not being part of the whole system.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I'd like to thank you for coming on Coffee, Cigarettes, Gnosis, and it's always an honor and a pleasure having you here, Phil.
Well, it's my privilege to be allowed on. Thank you very much.
You're a great man of Gnosis, and we hope to have you soon when the next book comes out.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day now.
You too, mate.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Nature's way